All right, welcome back to Cyber for Hire, the Managed Security Podcast. Once again, I'm Bradley Barth with SC Media. In the first half of our show, we talked with Bill Brenner at Cyber Risk Alliance about recent identity and access management trends. Right now, I'd like to welcome Bill back in to examine our MSSP industry strategy topic of the week, presenting our big idea in business, optimizing vendor relationships, how to get in your partner's good graces. Obviously, managed security providers want to optimize their rapport with customers, but don't overlook the importance of fostering a mutually beneficial relationship with your cyber solution vendor partners as well. In this segment, we'll look at how MSSPs can best leverage their vendor agreements to ensure they're receiving top-notch responsive service and they're gaining access to the most up-to-date solutions and the most flexible pricing plans. Bill, where are MSSPs most guilty of not extracting the most out of their vendor relationships? What assets are they not leveraging? What are they not asking for that they're entitled to?
So I'm not going to single out managed providers entirely because this includes them, but it is also not limited to them. And that is communication with your providers, with your vendors. There tends to be the habit of you have your security solution deployed, and unless something really specific goes wrong or there's an attack really blowing up in the news, people are not spending enough time just communicating with the vendors. And the shoe is on the other foot too. Vendors are all over the place when it comes to regular communication and management of customers using the technology in the field. And I think really having that, you should be touching base with your vendors on a regular basis, whether that's weekly, whether that's bi-weekly, whether that's monthly, but just having that communication when there's an update to be made or when something bad is happening. Those are all situations that are communications that happen under stress, and that isn't always conducive to working well with each other. So to me, that's one of the big things. To me, the best vendors out there take their account management deadly seriously and are having regular meetings to go over what's working and what's not. So to me, that's really one of the huge items.
I know you said you don't want to single out MSSPs because obviously vendor relationship management is something that all organizations need to contend with. But from the vendor perspective, I'd be curious to ask you, do you feel like vendors see MSSPs as just another customer, or are they a power customer because they are effectively exposing the vendor's solutions to a multitude of client organizations? And if that's the case, can MSSPs leverage this status as a power user, get across that, hey, you might want to treat me as a VIP here because I have that multiplier effect with working with all of my clients and exposing them to your solution?
Yeah, well, interestingly enough, I think where you find vendors doing best at their communication with clients, they focus on the power users, the VIPs, as you put it. And it's often other parts of the organization that have responsibilities tied to your product that need regular communications. Now, if you're a vendor, you can't do one-on-ones with everybody all the time. But there are things that you can do to make sure that you're speaking to those who may not be the VIPs. And that includes newsletters that you can be creating for them, regular email tidbits, tips, news updates. Here are things happening in the news that you should be watching out for when it comes to security. And here is how you should be using our product for that specific challenge. I think those are some things that help for sure. But it really is, if the two sides aren't talking to each other unless there's a problem, well, that's a problem. Because you're not
Well,
going to
right,
be
because
using, because you're not going to serve the client the best you can, and you're not going to use the product, if you are the client, as best you can for your environment.
Absolutely. I mean, at the end of the day, it is a two-way relationship, right? So, if you're an MSSP and you've got certain vendors that you'd like to see a better relationship with, it might be that what you get out of the relationship also depends on what you put in. And then actually, if we're also even being candid here, in some cases, there might even be a little bit of a quid pro quo to these relationships where it becomes where you're really trying to create a mutually beneficial relationship on both sides, where both sides are really getting something out of having a closer relationship. Would you not agree?
I would.
So, in your mind, what would you say should be of highest priority for managed service providers coordinating with their vendor partners? If you were going to say, be a little more assertive, be a little more forward, state what it is that you want out of this relationship. What in your mind should be at the top of their list?
So in this part of the communication, I really do think that MSSPs have a responsibility to keep the feet of the vendors they use to the fire. You have to always be coming back and asking questions. You have to hold them to the standard where anytime a change is made somewhere, it's communicated. Anytime an update is not just ready to deploy, but in the works and is going to be deployed within, say, that following month, needs to be communicated. So communication, I know I've spent a lot of time talking about how both sides can do it, but when it comes to the managed provider side, you really just have to constantly be asking questions about what's new, what kind of updates are around the pike, how can I prepare now for when that's ready to deploy, how are we, are there ways that we're using you in our environment that is not as optimized as can be? Let's talk through that. But yeah, you have to constantly keep a vendor's feet to the fire. And I think most of the vendors would tell you the same thing.
Absolutely. And
Because
really at the end of the day,
nobody wants to do a poor job,
Oh, no, absolutely not. And I mean, at the end of the day, the managed services provider working with these vendors, again, they need to also understand what's highest priority for them and be able to, as you said, communicate. Communication so often is the key. That's been an ongoing theme through so many of our episodes already, Bill, in Cyber for Hire, is really being able to, communicate, your wants and needs with your partners, with your clients. So if you're looking for more responsive service, if you're looking for, what's the newest, most up-to-date solutions, if you're looking for more flexibility in your pricing plans, these are the type of things where you absolutely need to speak up. And certainly, vendor relationship management will be an area that we will explore in several future episodes, as well as we dive even deeper into this topic. For this particular episode, due to some time constraints, we're going to have a little bit of an abbreviated episode, or a little bit of an abbreviated part 2 of our show. So we're going to move on from here to the next segment of our show, which is called Dear Cyber for Hire. Now, this is an advice column segment where we get to play marriage counselor between managed services providers and their clients to help mend fences when the relationship goes awry. And so the following letter that we present here has been dramatized and anonymized to protect the innocent. But the conflict represented here is a very real problem that companies face. And so Bill, I'm about to present to you this scenario. As always, we've got some very juicy MSSP melodrama to present to our audience today. And this one is going to come from the client side of the relationship. So fellas, cue the music. Dear Cyber for Hire, I'm not sure why I'm even bothering to write this email. It's not as if you're going to acknowledge it. I'm just a lonely voice in a vast, hollow echo chamber, longing to be heard. I'm sorry. I'm not being fair to you, but that's how I feel sometimes because my MSSP partner has become so uncommunicative. Whenever I email my account manager with an issue that requires his attention, it takes what seems like an eternity for him to respond via email. I know I'm not his only client, but sometimes I wonder if he's this way with all his partners or just me. Am I the unreasonable one? Am I too impatient? Perhaps I do send a few too many emails. What is an appropriate waiting time to hear back when I send out an inquiry? Sincerely, increasingly ignored, insecure, and impatient in Indianapolis. Bill, in an earlier episode with Ryan, we had a letter that complained of an unresponsive customer support helpline. Now, this is a little bit of a different offshoot of that. Here we have the person in charge of managing your case not really being timely with their response. On the other hand, some questions are maybe more high priority than others, and as acknowledged in the letter, sometimes the MSSP may be bombarding the client with communications. So what's typically considered a good practice here? How long should it take for an MSSP to respond to an email? When should a client feel emboldened enough to follow up?
So it's a harder question to answer than I think it would seem on the surface. In my worldview, communications like this should be same day. You have a question, you get a response and some guidance same day, because in security things are moving so fast that to me it's not okay if if you're the MSSP and your client comes knocking with an urgent question, or maybe not even so urgent, it's not a good look to wait days to get back to them. If you're the vendor interfacing with the MSSP, it's really the same thing. And this might be, maybe it's too draconian or rigid for some folks, but in my mind, yeah, I think same day communications are vital. And if it's not going to be same day, because there are reasons, things do happen. Sometimes it takes longer to address a question, but just letting the other side know that you're working on it, that they've been seen, even if it takes a couple days for a full answer. I think that's really the key. Showing that you're there, you're working on it, and you see them.
Absolutely, 100%. You can't leave the other side hanging. And so there you go again, perfect illustration of how it seems to so often come back to the notion of communication. Just another perfect example of that right there. Normally, this would be the point of the show in which we would also give you our irrelevant pitch of the week, but we're a little short on time this week, so we're going to wrap things up a little extra early today. But I would really love to thank once again my guest fill-in host, Bill Brenner from the Cyber Risk Alliance, for being with us today. Thanks for swooping in a fairly last-minute assignment and providing us your expertise and perspective today. Really greatly appreciated. And we hope we can have you on again soon to share some of your thoughts. One more time, we're going to continue our Identiverse coverage next week as well, as I'll be conducting an interview from the actual convention with our guest for next week as we explore some additional issues surrounding identity and access management. But in the meantime, we're going to go, but do not despair, because we will be back again next week with episode number 24. Meanwhile, feel free to check out even more cybersecurity podcast content on the SC Media, MSSP Alert, and Channel E2E websites. Until next time, I'm Bradley Barth. Please reach out to us via our show page with your comments, questions, and insights all about the business of cybersecurity. We'll keep the conversation going on the next episode of Cyber for Hire, your inside source for cyber outsourcing.